All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Tuesday. It's an Arlen Tuesday. Arlen, how are you today?
I think I'm doing pretty well. It's beautiful outside, so the sky is clear, which is unusual in Vermont. Usually there's lots of clouds, but it looks pretty good.
Sounds really nice up there. I know you were out Saturday at one of the No Kings events in the Green Mountain State, and the weather was beautiful then too, was it not? From the picture I saw, it looked like it was lovely out.
Yeah, no, it was very nice. I was very happy to be there among people that shared my point of view. I guess it was a small group, but it felt good. It felt energetic.
Yeah, we'll talk about the No Kings events throughout the country and specifically where Arlen was Saturday in a bit. Where we're also going to unfortunately have to center Gaza as I have to continue to, despite the so-called ceasefire. Things are really rough there. But before we get to any of that, Arlen, do want to just talk personally for a moment. So you're in Vermont, and one of the ideas that came into my head is I do what I do because I want to change the way things are, and that requires me to be to keep somewhat current when it comes to the news, when it comes to information. But lately, I've been feeling that I'm not able to change anything. It just keeps getting worse and worse, and the news that I acquaint myself with is extremely depressing. So does that mean the solution is to kind of, retire to some place like Vermont, some small town, and just disconnect and, I don't know, hang out with my dog? Do you think that's the answer to these problems?
I think what you're talking about, so many people are feeling, millions and millions of people are feeling because they don't have it. They don't see any way to make things change. And there really isn't anything right now to make things change. So they get out on the streets and protested with like-minded people. And I thought it went very well Saturday. I mean, it was huge, the biggest one-day protest, I understand, in this country. So they total around, they say an estimate was 7 million people. And, it's just, what else can you do? I mean, people talk about the next election, midterm or whatever, but I'm not even sure we're going to have a next election. It's just that uncertain for me.
Well, again, that makes the idea of, kind of scrolling yourself away somewhere doubly or triply appealing. Yeah, we'll talk about the crowd size as well. The sizes, the aggregate number of protesters as well. I've got some data I want to share. Of course, all of it is guesstimation. There's no science behind the tallies because there were so many small events, such as the one you attended in Fairhaven, Vermont, that getting an accurate number is impossible. The best estimators can do is come up with a range, and we'll talk about that as well. But you said it was a good event, small event.
Yeah, it was. Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
What you just talked about, how looking at the news is so depressing. And I hear that so often from people, and it's really tough. And I'm the same way. It's so depressing. I don't look at the news as much as I used to. And the same with, anybody that's anti-Trump. It's just, the news is miserable because he has control of everything and he does what he wants. And usually he does very, to me, insane activities and things and says crazy things. It's not pretty.
Yeah, I was depressed before Trump became president. I mean, Trump is definitely not a positive in any way, or in virtually no ways as far as I'm concerned. But things were bad before Trump, and they've only gotten worse since he took office for the second time, in my view. 240-242-5646. The worst place in the world continues. It's so sad, Arlen. I had held out some hopes that maybe things would get a little better in Gaza. You see the news here from Al Jazeera. Has the ceasefire been broken? It's small, but fragile ceasefire to end Hamas's 2-year war in Gaza Israel's 2-year war in Gaza hangs by a thread, with Rafah remaining closed and restricted. So Israel is still strangling Gaza, maybe lending a little bit more air into the windpipe there. They're still killing Palestinians. And now they've got the hostages out. So whatever incentive they might have had to restrain themselves is likely gone. Only if Trump and Witkoff hold them accountable will they stop. Will they not, I guess, start up again with a full-blown killing? And that's certainly not much to hang your hat on. So, yeah, Arlen, it's the place that most upsets me, our activities that most upset me, and there's good reason for great pessimism there.
Yeah, there was so much congratulations for President Trump and what he did, and for getting peace in that area. But I think those who know the area and understand what's going on there, realize it's very uncertain, very unpredictable, and any kind of truce is likely to be broken. So, that's just the way. It's not unexpected. Let's put it that way.
240-242-5646. I will take a call if you call. I will also try, I do my best sometimes, other times not as much, to monitor the chat and see if anyone comments there. I will try to get you your comment on the air if possible. I did a show yesterday, Arlen. This was we did center, as we'll today, the rallies over the weekend, the No Kings event. Let me see if I can get that the thumbnail that I used. And you were talking about the numbers. So the organizers estimated 7 million across the country. When I tried to get a more accurate number, because obviously organizers are always going to exaggerate. And when I saw the numbers from LA and New York, I thought it was fair to say there could be 6 million. I think between LA and New York, you had 500,000. But that number there, and you can see my caption, over 6 million Americans say F you Trump, will it matter? My video did pretty well that I did with Carlos. It got a lot of folks responding to that question. A lot of, I don't know if they're MAGA, but some were probably MAGA, certainly Trump supporters, more so than we usually see. And they really took me to task over that 7 or 6 million number. I was trying to be conservative. As I mentioned, Arlen, the organizer said 7. I thought, well, that seems quite high. Organizers always exaggerate. So let's cut it to 6, right? I figured that's probably fair. And you can see what the responses were. 1.5 million. They cut back from 6 to 1.5 million is a small turnout. No, it was not 6 million, 10% at most. So that would be 600,000. Total BS. Not even close to 6 million. Lucky if it topped 1 million. And Andy there at the bottom, over 6 million. Keep dreaming. So I, first of all, find this very interesting. I wonder who spread the news about this video. Why was this getting such play in circles that wanted to mock the idea that there were that many people anti-Trump? I don't know. I have no idea if it was just the caption, the thumbnail. I don't know why. They're all different people. I'm glad you all commented. I would have liked to have seen some people who had watched the video. We weren't that pro rally either, Arlen. Carlos, for example, my co-host, said he didn't go. He didn't have any interest in going. He wasn't going to go to a Democratic, or as I think he might have said, I don't want to say this to Carlos, but wouldn't go to a Democrat-sponsored event. I don't think he said that. He's to my, even maybe to my left on some issues. We don't like the Democrats here much at Halitics, except for Arlen's more of a fan. But yeah, I would have liked to see some folks like yourself who were in support. Do you see them, though? A long-winded repost by me, Arlen. Did you see this as a pro-Democratic event or more of an anti-Trump event?
I think it's anti-Trump for sure. I mean, the name of it, No Kings, obviously, we're talking about Donald Trump. And I think, the biggest success of this was not just the numbers, but the way it was played up by the MAGA and the far-right and Republicans, that was going to be, anti-American people, and Antifa was going to be there, and there's going to be all kinds of violence, and they made it sound like it's going to be an insurrection, And it turned out to be very, very peaceful. I mean, I didn't hear of any significant uprising, problems or violence or anything like that. People were happy. People were, demonstrating, with funny signs and things like that. So obviously what they were, the right wing was talking about prior to the event didn't happen.
Well, let's show one of the protesters with a funny sign. We might as well take this opportunity, and then I'm going to get right back into the numbers game. Some people don't want to play that, but I think it's relevant, at least to get a kind of a sense of just how many Americans were out there. There's somebody with his No Faux King way. Very nice, Arlen. I like that a lot. Did you make that yourself?
I did. I was kind of proud of what I did there. Freehand with just some marking pens, and I cut out a picture of a crown, and but of all the people there was somebody else had the exact same sign. So whatever.
Well, did you come up with it on your own, or had you seen that? Because I would assume that you had heard this before, but maybe not.
Well, what I do is I go online, protest signs, best protest signs, and there's just, hundreds and thousands of good ones all over the place. And I thought that one was pretty good, and I decided to use that particular one. But there was all kinds of those kind of signs all over the internet.
Yeah, very good. Well played. And I would note that it makes me think of, I guess it's Vietnamese soup, right? Called pho, because there's a lot of restaurants that call themselves Pho King, and they serve that Vietnamese beef soup, which actually is remarkably tasty. But this is not a positive thing, unlike the soup. Yeah, Arlen, go ahead.
No. I think isn't it French? I think for false, but
well, it's Vietnam was under French control for quite a period of time, so their cuisine became somewhat Frenchified. But I believe the soup pho is a Vietnamese dish that has French, trappings to it or garnishings.
Well, I've been to Vietnam. I've had that, and you're right, and it's very good. They do a good job with it, and the French definitely had their influence on Vietnam.
So back to the numbers briefly. I got a lot of heat for that 6 million number. Newsweek, I was looking into this more carefully today. As I mentioned, I just ratcheted down the 7 million estimate to 6, hoping I'd be in the ballpark. And I looked at this article from Newsweek that came out yesterday and thought, all right, good, I was in the ballpark. All my carpers, the critics, were wrong. No King's Map estimates highest, lowest turnout by state. We'll get into that. Arlen, speaking of states, let's just talk about that for one moment. Your state, Vermont, one of your two states, actually did have the highest percentage of population appear at an event. And you had thoughts about that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. You told me about it, and I'm very proud of Vermont. Vermont's a very liberal state. We know that. And also, I think what Vermont did, they had No King's protests all over this state. They, dozens and dozens of them. So I think, people who wanted to be at those things had good opportunities to do so. The bigger cities had, a lot more people, but there was a lot of small ones like the one I was at too. So I'm proud of Vermont.
Do you think, Arlen, did you make any acquaintances, you think, where you might hang out with some of these people? Because one of the nice things I think about going to in-person events such as this is you do meet people that you have at least one thing in common with, shared political sensibilities.
Well, there was one woman there who seemed to be in charge of the Indivisible group in Rutland, which is not that far away from me, and she gave me the information, and I could certainly see myself going down there just to be with people who believe like I believe.
You mentioned also, Arlen, that at least in Rutland, the, I guess, second largest city in Vermont, I'm not really sure, maybe it's Brattleboro, Burlington, the largest, they had some pretty sizable numbers of folks for the size of the cities.
Yeah, I heard some big numbers in towns that I wouldn't think would have as big numbers as they did, like Brandon, Vermont, not a huge city, but they had a good turnout. And of course, Rutland and Burlington, the biggest city in Vermont, they had, I think, more than one event, and there were big numbers there too.
You were saying thousands, right, in those cities?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
It's pretty impressive, pretty amazing. And according to that Newsweek quote I have on the screen now, 1 in every 23 Vermonters attended an event. I think there's about 800,000 people in Vermont. So I don't know if I can do the math. That would be several thousand, 3,000 would make sense. It's 3,000 times 23. I think that's no more. Yeah, 4,000. So yeah, maybe 1,000 in Brattleboro, Burlington, and Rutland. Maybe a little more in Burlington. Does make sense. Makes a lot of sense. It's pretty impressive. What about Monterey, your other hometown? You heard a report from there that there were many thousands on the streets.
Yeah. I was at the last No Kings protest in June, and we figured there was about 5,000 people there. It was huge. I mean, people were crowded right next to each other, and for a long stretch, and lots of cars were going by honking and giving good peace symbols and things like that to show their support. So, and then what I heard from somebody who's a friend of mine was it was bigger, the one on Saturday, closer maybe to 7,000. I think that's what the Monterey Herald said. So, which usually they're pretty conservative on a lot of things like this. So, yeah, there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, and a lot of, people are really motivated in Monterey, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah, it's what we want to see, and hopefully there'll be pressure on both parties to take actions that are pro-worker, pro-everyday American, not pro-billionaire, not pro-military. That is not, sadly, what we've seen. I wanted to show this real quick. This is from a website, an aggregator that Newsweek cited Arlen for the proposition that there were millions of people at the events. And they ratcheted down. You can see the sum that they come up with on the left side is 3.7 million plus. And that's based on hard data in LA, San Francisco, New York, where counts were taken. Now, obviously, that number can't be deemed reliable, but they do believe that it's pretty close to correct with respect to cities where there was actually counts taken by police and other professionals for various purposes. But that's only part of the story. That wouldn't include a city like the cities that you're describing in Vermont, at least the smaller ones. When they add those in, they come up to a lower bound. So they think the minimum number of folks out was about 4.4 million. The median, in other words, they are guessing with some that the most likely numbers around 4.8, 4.9 million, and then upper bound over 6 million. So that's where we're looking at. Still very sizable crowds. Makes my $6 million number not look that bad whatsoever, and really puts to shame the people who are saying, oh, there was 1,600,000. Now, there were many millions of people who went out.
One more thing, I think it's important to note that I think there was larger crowds than there was in June. So people are, more motivated to get out there and more upset by what's going on in the country to get out there. So I don't know the exact number, but it sounds to me like it was a lot more than in June, and maybe the next one will be that much larger. We'll see.
Yeah, Arlen, one of the complaints that both Carlos and I had over this event, or concerns rather, maybe is a better word, is that for the Democrats or for some political party to take advantage of this and take power, right, seize power from the MAGA Republicans, they need to, try to harness the energy, the anti-Trump energy, in support of a progressive agenda that the American public wants. And we didn't see that. Did you see anything like that?
I don't think that was the point of this. I'm sure lots of the leaders were saying, go in your small groups and get in, go to regular meetings and build up your, the popularity and all that. I'm sure that goes on a lot. Like the person who told me about Indivisible in Rutland, I'm sure they'd like me to come down and participate in that, and I just might do it. So, the problem is these marches are great, but they don't really result in anything except they make the Republicans and the right wingers really look stupid based on what they were saying about how, there was going to be all kinds of anti-American violence and all that. And, none of that happened. It was a very positive protest, I think.
But as you point out, it's not clear what the impact long-term will be. And again, it seems to me these are opportunities for Democrats, for progressives to try to, again, harness that energy in support of candidates who will, who the public, finds compelling, and we're not seeing that.
Well, that wasn't what was supposed to happen on Saturday. It wasn't about support this candidate or that candidate. It was just saying we don't want kings like Donald Trump in our country. We fought against that and overcame that in 1776, and we don't want to have to do it again.
Well, we saw from your one of your faves, Robert Reich, who you often repost on thebigpicturereport.com, at thebigpicturereport.com, our own blogs. This, which I'm right here, Tomorrow and Forever, No Kings in America. And I noticed this, Arlen. This is actually, I screenshot this from your blog. One of the things I noticed is actually he posted this, did Reich, and I don't know if you did too, I suppose, the day before the No Kings event. Did that impact on, did you read that and say, I've got to go to No Kings? Were you already planning to go? Why is this an important article, in your opinion, worthy of being reposted?
I'm sure Robert Reich is frustrated the way things are in this country, and I'm sure he was hoping that there'd be a big turnout. I don't know that he, made anybody else go, but he's just stating his opinion. What else can he do? And he does it quite regularly, complaining about what's going on in Washington, and so he was hoping for something positive, I guess, to happen over the weekend.
What he focuses on in this piece is the Insurrection Act, which Trump has cited to justify going into cities with the National Guard, possibly even the military, to quash or quell internal rebellions. He said that's a bigger fear than external enemies. And Reich is very afraid that Trump could use that law or use it as a pretext to impose some kind of, I guess, martial law, military rule, even more than what we're seeing right now with the ICE thugs in the streets.
A lot of people are very worried about that. And I mean, it's happening. I mean, he's going into cities that don't want him and that aren't, that bad off. And he just goes wherever he wants and sends troops wherever he wants, which happens to be usually blue states. And, he's stirring things up. And the last thing I heard is maybe the next site might be in San Francisco or the Bay Area.
Yeah, I didn't know there were. I know there's some problems in San Francisco. I didn't know they were that bad that they needed to be addressed by some kind of national force going in, some sort of federales. Here's more from Reich. I mean, I thought he really does make a good point here. Again, what frustrates me, and I understand the No Kings rally, the purpose may not have been to try to rally people to support candidates in opposition to Trump and MAGA, but to me that would be the biggest reason you'd have it. I can't really see any other purpose to it, because Trump has made it clear he's not going to respond to the will of the people. There's no way, just because he says, oh, there's a lot of people who are mad at me, maybe I should change my policies. That doesn't happen. Instead, his response is, I'm going to make a video where I drop poop bombs on these people. So, I mean, this isn't, if your goal is to change Trump's mind, this ain't the way to do it.
No. It's funny. I was hearing Rand Paul interviewed on, I think it was Meet the Press, and the person that was interviewing him, said, "This is what Donald Trump said about you: is all these awful things. Rand Paul is this, Rand Paul is that, Rand Paul is not helpful to anybody." And then Rand Paul says, "I think he's been a great president." It's crazy.
Well, I think Paul's more focused on Trump's policies and doesn't really care about the insults. But if that is the case, it's odd because Paul's policies are not really similar to Trump's at all. Paul does not believe in military adventures such as the one in Israel. In support of Israel. Trump, I believe Paul, as a free marketer, is totally opposed to the tariffs, even though I personally support them, but I disagree with Paul on that, or I support tariffs in general, maybe not Trump's. And Paul has always been in favor of open borders and not a nasty, aggressive posture by the force by the federal government. So, in fact, Trump is doing everything different than Paul would have, at least purports to believe. So is he dishonest, or is he just sucking up to power? What's up with that?
My guess he's worried about his next election. Unless he shows some support for Trump and shows some support for Trump's ideas, that he may get primaried or lose the election. I think that's probably the most important thing for him and for many other politicians.
Yeah, he makes a point. I think Reich makes a good point that Trump wants to use this Insurrection Act, and yet, and in fact, he's the one who is, I guess, committing some kind of insurrection. But he also pardoned those who really were trying to seize power illegally, the January 6th rioters.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ironies there. He does Reich Congress to pass a law to restrict the president's powers, even when invoking the Insurrection Act. The problem is it's not going to happen. The Republican Congress ain't going to do that, and Trump would never sign such a bill in any case. So I think it's nice that he brings this to our attention. It's something to worry about, but I don't know how impactful it's going to be.
Yeah, you're very right. Let's face it, Trump is the kind of president that doesn't really care about laws or rules or traditions. I mean, he just does whatever he wants to do. And so far, he's been very good at getting away with most of those kind of things.
All right, this article caught your attention in the New York Times. Now we are going to talk about ways to try to seize power back from Trump, to take it away from him. And Trump having both houses of Congress is obviously a very serious problem. These women, though, are not running. Spanberger, now see, I kind of lost the thread there, because Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill are actually running for governors of the states of New Jersey and Virginia. But there is a relevance to the federal government, because they're emblematic, says Thomas Edsall, says the Larry Sabato. They're the kind of Democrats that the Democrats want to run, and that they want to run next year. So what do you think about that? Do you think that Spanberger and Sherrill are the right people to take on Trump and MAGA going forward?
No, I don't really like the idea of, moderates, running and controlling the Democratic Party, because we've talked about this before. They're just going to continue accepting money from big corporations and billionaires, and a lot of people will have the same negative feelings about the Democratic Party that they've been having for years. So I think some change is needed. I think people like Mamdani and AOC and people like that. I'd like to see more of those people elected and, make some real changes, because I think if the Democrats make the right kind of changes and give a positive message about what they're going to do, health care and all good things for workers, that could make a real difference, not stay with the same issues they've had before.
Yeah, you make really good points, Arlen. A couple of thoughts. One is I'm less troubled in one way by the Mikey Sherrill candidacy than by the Spanberger one. And this goes to the show I did yesterday with Carlos, who pointed out that Mikey Sherrill did win a contested primary with a number of candidates, some to her left, some to her right. She was clearly, I mean, if the vote counts, she was the choice of the Democratic primary voters in the state of New Jersey, which is appropriate. As I understand it, Spanberger ran uncontested. She was basically anointed the gubernatorial candidate by the Virginia Democratic Party, and I think that is problematic. I do think that they probably are pretty decent candidates for these two states. But the problem, as you point out, Arlen, is that we live in a national. We live in a nation, not in any one state or two states. And when the party becomes reflected in the eyes of the electorate by these sort of centrist Dems, militarist Dems, right? Both, I think, especially Spanberger was in the CIA. I'm not sure about Sherrill's record. They don't excite the base. People don't say, well, gee, they're going to really make the changes that we need.
Good point. Hal, if you don't mind, can you take over for a minute? I see my power's running out on my computer. I thought the Ethernet keep it going, but I will find a cord and charge my computer as we're talking.
Well, so we will let Arlen go, and he will come back in a moment. Yeah, you got to keep that computer plugged in. I don't think there's any power coming from the Ethernet. So back to Sherrill Spanberger. I agree they are not the right choices. I thought it was very ironic, by the way, that, and here we'll have Sabato's comment as well. He's kind of I guess a politician whisperer, or some kind of wise head, gray beard type political poli-sci guy in Charlottesville, Virginia, that he comments, both gubernatorial contests are tests of the brand that Dems believe is best suited for their comeback, right? Comeback against Trump. And he continues to note, does Sabato, that they're not going, and I think Arlen made this point as well, that they're not going to look for a Mamdani type. They're not going to look for leftists or populist. These are your standard issue, centrist, corporate funded, corporate approved candidates who may play well enough in New Jersey and Virginia, but nationwide, very unlikely to mean big numbers, big appeal, a turnaround for the Democratic Party. What I wanted to ask Arlen, I don't know if he's back, I'm going to check in a second.
I am back.
Yeah, so let's get Arlen on screen here, and I want to ask you, thanks for letting me know.
Sorry about that. I'll know better next time.
No. Yeah, you got to get that thing. The Ethernet doesn't have power, doesn't share power. So let me get this up. What I thought was interesting that Sabato said at Virginia, he says both gubernatorial contests are tests of the brand that Dems believe is best suited for their comeback. And they will not. But if they lose, there's no Mamdani-like nominee in either state. If this brand can't sell in two mostly Democratic states, Democrats will have to move on to some other brand for 26. Does this mean, Arlen, that we want Sherrill and Spanberger to lose so that Dems move on to another brand? Is that your takeaway from that?
We'll take them, but they're not going to inspire people to love the Democratic Party, which is, as you know, the approval rating for the party is very, very low. And to do the same things that they were doing before means it's going to continue to be low. So, like I said, I'd like to see something different, something where the Democrats really push certain policies. And, the New York Times had an interesting cover story, I think it was Sunday, about the Democrats spend too much time talking about Trump and criticizing Trump instead of getting their ideas, across to the people, which I think you feel the same, and I feel the same, that they really on a show, say what they're going to do, what they want to do, and how they're going to help middle class and working people.
No question, 100% on that. And you know what I found really amazing to me is the idea that, and I think Edsall repeats it, that a centrist woman Democrat with strong military credentials is the best suited to take on MAGA. I mean, aren't those the exact two candidates that Trump defeated? I mean, that's why I did this thumbnail. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see the little, no Hillary, no Kamala. I mean, Hillary was the Secretary of State. She was a hawk. She had supported the war on Iraq. And without question, a real moderate. Harris, kind of more of a cipher in some ways, but she also embraced moderate policies. I don't know where the idea would ever occur to anyone that type of candidate is the best kind to defeat Trump.
I think it depends a lot on just, what state you're in and, what part of the country you're in. I think there may be some places where a moderate Democrat can do well and has a good chance of winning. And other states or places like New York City, they like somebody that comes on strong and has, new ideas and, is positive, like Mamdani. And so I think it just depends a lot on the state. But the Democrats definitely, I agree, they shouldn't be concentrating on just how bad Trump is. We all know that. But on what they could do better.
I want to play a clip here. I don't know if you've heard this. This is the main progressive, Graham Plattner. We've discussed him before a little bit, I think, Arlen. I don't know if, how much with you, but I was really taken by this short he did. I've been doing shorts as well on YouTube, so I'm keeping a closer eye on these short type videos. And I want to just play it and get your reaction, and then show the reaction of the Democratic establishment as well to Graham Plattner. Here we go.
Our taxpayer dollars can build schools and hospitals in America, not bombs to destroy them in Gaza. Now, I grew up in rural Maine, and I did 4 tours in the infantry. And I am not afraid to name the enemy. And the enemy is the oligarchy. Now, Susan Collins' charade is wearing thin. No one cares that you pretend to be remorseful as you sell out to lobbyists. Symbolic opposition does not reopen hospitals. Weak condemnations do not bring back Roe v. Wade. Selling out the same working class voters who've delivered mandate for change after mandate for change is not forgivable. A performative politics that enables the destruction of our way of life is disqualifying for the role of United States Senator. Maine deserves better than Susan Collins.
All right, so quick reaction to that, Arlen.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot of Democrats speak like he does. And there are many around the country that do, like Pittsburgh in Chicago, the governor there. That we need people like that who will stir up people and, tell the truth. The MAGA people are destroying the country, and Trump is destroying the country. And this is what we could do better. And, he did a good job of presenting his ideas.
I thought very powerful. He focused on the issues that are obviously of importance to Maine: opening rural hospitals, decent jobs. He's spoken in the past about the importance of a living wage, having the ability to live a secure life economically, and to have time for leisure, to have time for relationships. Plattner, to me, is the exact kind of Democrat that the party should embrace, not the Spanbergers or the Sherrills. Now, that said, look, you're right, states are different, but Maine is hardly some left-wing state. I mean, it's a pretty centrist state, too. One of their Congress members, Golden, I believe, he may be an independent. He's sort of a center-right Democrat at best. One of their senators is definitely, Angus King is not a Democrat, though he caucuses with them. So this state is hardly a left-wing state, and yet this guy, with his economic populism, is really exciting the base. Relatively young, great voice. Seems like the kind of candidate the Democrats would welcome, would want to embrace. And yet, who is Chuck Schumer? What is Chuck Schumer doing? He has decided to go all in for the septuagenarian governor. There she is, Janet Mills, a centrist. She's known more for fighting Trump on trans rights issues than fighting for rural hospitals for Mainers. To me, this is really a very serious indictment if we need yet another of Chuck Schumer and his leadership.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it is with the leadership of the Democratic Party right now. They're playing it very close to the vest, being very conservative, not wanting to take chances. And I think this is the time that they need to take chances, especially against a candidate like Susan Collins. I mean, I don't know how anybody could like her. She goes, off in one direction and then goes the other direction, and she needs to go.
Well, don't you think, I mean, honestly, you talk about taking chances, but to my way of thinking, actually, Plattner would be a much better candidate, a much stronger candidate against Susan Collins than Janet Mills. One of the knocks against Collins is she's getting older. She's in her 70s now. She's out of touch with what life is like for the average Mainer. And Mills is 6 years older. One of the main critiques of the Democratic Party is they're the party of the senior citizens. So why would you get behind another senior and also lose that leverage you might have against Collins because of her age? I don't think it's even playing it safe. I think it's a situation where Chuck Schumer doesn't want an economic populist. He doesn't want someone who's going to take on elites and the establishment, because that's who feeds him. That's the hand that feeds him, and he doesn't want to bite it no matter what.
And Schumer has an age issue himself. I mean, he's getting pretty old, and yet he's clinging to his job when he should be, giving that kind of job to somebody younger and more aggressive. As far as older candidates, there is one exception, Bernie Sanders. I think he could be old and still do well. But yeah, I think it's really important to get impressive young candidates, progressive candidates, remake the Democratic Party if that's what it takes.
All right, you mentioned Bernie, you've mentioned AOC as well as perhaps the right ages, or at least the right candidates, one young, one old, or at least one younger. I guess, I don't know, is she even that young? She's like 35 now. She was young when she first came into office. I guess for a Democrat, she's a puppy, like my puppy Dolly, who's not in the room with me. Let me play this. Here's Bernie and AOC on CNN with Caitlin Collins. I want your reaction to this. So let me just, before we get, so I took this from a website called Memeology, I believe. That's the YouTube channel, Memeology, so people know, full disclosure. And he just, I think it's a he, Memeology just copied from the video the section where AOC and Bernie respond to Collins' question about whether she would primary the villain. Arlen and I were just complaining about Chuck Schumer. So here is the discussion.
But are you saying that Senator Schumer should not be worried about a primary challenge from you?
I mean,
all right.
No.
Let me jump in on this one. This is what
we're talking about.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
This is what we're talking about.
You have a country that is falling apart. We had a housing crisis, a healthcare crisis, an education crisis, massive income and wealth inequality, a corrupt campaign finance system, and the media says, "Oh, you're going to run. What are you going to run for?" Nobody cares. So run more.
Nobody cares. There's the House Speaker and President Trump and the Vice President saying it.
Right.
Pardon?
Well, of course, they're saying it to deflect attention away from the real issue.
Exactly.
And here, let me tell you what the real issue is. Let's see if CNN talks about it. We're living in the richest country in the history of the world, right? All right, you tell me why we're the only nation not to guarantee health care to all people, the only nation not to guarantee paid family and medical leave, why we have a $7.25 an hour minimum wage, why we have 800,000 people sleeping out on the street, why we have a president who denies the reality of climate change, why we have oligarchs on top who have more and more power every day. Let's talk about that issue, not her own political future. She'll decide that.
All right. So here's my question: is Bernie's and to a lesser degrees AOC's high dudgeon at the question appropriate? Is it fitting, or do you think there was something appropriate about the question that Caitlin Collins asked?
Yeah, she's doing what typical CNN anchor would do, and everybody always talks about, are you going to run for president? Are you going to run for senator? Are you going to do this or that? And Bernie wants obviously the attention to be focused on on issues, that the terrible issues that are going on in our country that aren't being worked on, and certainly will not get worked on with Trump. So I wish he was president. And let's not forget he's from Vermont.
So, Arlen, let me push back on what your answer was, and then you can reply, and we'll move on. But I think it's a completely appropriate question, and I think that Bernie's answer was disingenuous in the extreme to try to turn it around and say, well, this is the media trying to stoke up controversy and pitting Democrats against each other, and we need to be focused on Trump. He brings up, Bernie does, the $7.25 minimum wage. There's been no change. He brings up Obamacare and the healthcare crisis. Those are in part the fault of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer's poor misleadership is a big reason that we didn't get an increase in the minimum wage in 2021 when Biden took office. Schumer could have gone to Biden and said, we've got to do something about that parliamentarian who's holding up the increase and saying that it has to be, that it can be filibustered. We've got to fight that. Chuck Schumer, throughout his career, has been unwilling to challenge the forces of capital. And that's a big reason we're in the place we are now. Even with regard to this healthcare situation where Bernie started talking about how people's premiums are going to double. Well, in the budget fight back in March, when Schumer had a real opportunity to say, no, we're not going to agree to raise the budget ceiling, the budget deficit limit. We're not going to agree to that. There's going to be a shutdown unless you take out the he could have refused to agree to the budget. He could have filibustered it. He had a lot of tools in his kit to stop it, and he didn't, which is a big reason that there's a very, very significant likelihood premiums will go up. In fact, they are going up. So it seems to me that this was a perfect opportunity for AOC and Bernie to say, yes, we have huge problems with Democratic leadership. We've got to change it if we're going to champion economic justice in this country. And instead, they pivot. I'm very, very upset by that answer, to be honest with you.
Well, I get really tired of network anchors and commentators, talking heads, always asking about, are you going to run for president? When are you going to run for president? This and that. And, those things will happen when they happen. But I think as long as the issues get out there, that's the most important thing. I think you're right, though. I mean, if they used that and said, yeah, I'll challenge Schumer in order to get this and this policy. So, there is, you're right on that issue. It's just different ways of doing things. And Bernie likes to do his way, and he and AOC are drawing big crowds when they go across the country, telling people the truth about, what's going on in this country.
All right. You're listening to Halitics with Arlen and, of course, it's Halitics. I got another story you wanted to discuss, Arlen. Let's see if there's anything. I assume that's the end of your answer. I don't know if you wanted to fill in, and I wasn't going to push back. I told you I'd let you have the reply. But yeah, I want to see Democrats take on their leadership at every opportunity. Yes, there's no question about that.
I was very excited by that segment. I thought it was terrific, and I wish to see, I'd like to see more of that, because you're normally not going to see it on typical network news.
I just thought the high dudgeon was totally misplaced. So Arlen and I are going to disagree like Siskel and Ebert over whether a movie gets a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I think that would be about the appropriate analogy there. You wanted to talk about this article. Trump calls diversity a threat. For our founders, it was American. So I guess I have one clip from it for the slide, but why did this article in particular speak to you, Arlen? This
you
piece.
can see what's going on in this country. People, minorities are being pushed aside, being treated poorly. It's not like it used to be where we would give some respect to, minorities and people who are a little bit different. Now it's, everybody should be a white nationalist. Trump is moving in that direction. He's taking advantage of people's prejudices, I think, and, just treating people who are, minorities a lot worse than they used to be. And I wonder how those people like, the blacks that increased their vote for Trump and the Hispanics, I wonder how they feel now, because he's going back to what I would expect him to do, which is basically be a racist. He's always been a racist, and he will continue to be a racist.
Trump has been a terrible president. I'm sure there are many people who voted for him who are very disappointed in his presidency and wish he were better. But elections are choices, and I think there was a sense that hasn't changed, right? I mean, we've seen Trump's approval rating numbers are very low, but so are the Democrats. So the regret people have for voting for Trump may not translate into, well, I should have voted for a Democrat, or why didn't I vote for a Democrat, but more a sense of, as we discussed at the beginning of this program, Arlen, resignation, depression. I have no friends. There's no allies. In this country, you're on your own.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, why the Democrats should be out there talking policy, that they will, help people get health care and food, food stamps and, all the things that would help, people who are low income or working people. And, they should be promoting unions and, talking about becoming, friends with the working people. That's what the Democrats need to come across as. And that would make a difference, I think.
Well, I agree with you there for sure. So just wanted to quote this from that piece there about diversity is the rule in America, not the exception. And certainly it's true, and it's the truth now. We have an incredibly diverse country, and I agree that's a major strength. But elites have always fought back against it, or always used that diversity as a lever to pit people against each other, and to therefore protect their own perquisites. I think we keep seeing that. We see that today as well. In 150 years ago in California, Leland Stanford was employing Chinese laborers on his railroads, paying them incredibly low wages. At the same time, when he ran for governor, he also employed them as household staff. At the same time, he railed against, when he ran for governor, against the immigrants, the Chinese immigrants. So, look, the elites do whatever they can to get as much as they can out of people, and also pit them against each other. And I think that's the real story of American history, not the fact that we have different groups, but the comment here, even as he praises his wife, the daughter of Indian immigrants, Mr. Vance, the vice president there, like other nativists, refuses to acknowledge that cultural diversity is in fact the through line of American history. I think they do kind of try to hearken back to this. Well, I don't think they deny there's diversity. I mean, they would acknowledge, yeah, there was slavery, but they don't have a problem. They don't have a problem with white supremacy, it would seem like, or at least they don't have a problem with some type of plutocracy where the wealthy are in complete control. They use diversity as a way to keep folks at each other's throats. But I do think, yes, we need to embrace different faiths, traditions, and it does make us all better if we can do it. And I think it's fair to even say that about the Constitution, that the government was designed in a way to transcend divisions between rural and urban, divisions between the industrialist and the artisan. I think that's true. How do we get back to that, Arlen?
Well, certainly we've had a lot of diversity in this country, and it's really helped the country in a lot of ways. Trump and his people seem to want to reverse it. They're going after. I think there was something about he hired 100, new people into his into the president's office, I guess, and like only 2 of them were black. I mean, it's and the things that are going on, like in the Smithsonian, they're trying to take away references to slavery, and these and library books that have things to say about LGBT people and minorities. They're trying to make this country as white as it was maybe 30, 40 years ago.
Which, according to this article, it was never that way, right? I mean, we always had lots of different groups coming in, and even when the immigrants were European, they were viewed as very different, right? We now have Latino immigrants, we have immigrants from Africa, we have immigrants from Asia. In the 1890s, 1880s, 1900, early 1900s, you had immigrants from Italy, from Ireland, less so from Ireland, maybe they'd come a little earlier, from Eastern Europe, and they were perceived as the other. They were looked down upon. So whoever are the newcomers are often used, again, as scapegoats to blame for whatever problems the working classes is undergoing at the time. I give this quote here. This is from Thomas E. Watson. He was a populist in the South in the 1890s from Georgia, and he talked to integrated farmers groups, so black and white farmers. There used to be a fair number of black agricultural, owners, land owners. Less so now. And he said to them, hey, don't vote your race, vote your class, vote your politics. Don't come together in support of the Klan, because they are not fighting for you. Their interests aren't yours. Instead, let's join together against the financiers from up north and the factory owners here in Georgia who are keeping us at each other's throats so that we can be fleeced. And I would love to see that argument made. I didn't see it in that article exactly, but it seems to me that's the real story of America. Can we bring disparate groups, identifiable groups, together in support of some type of economic fairness for them all?
Well, I think a lot of people have criticized the Democrats for talking too much about race and LGBT, just minorities, and it probably hurt them in the election. And I could see that. They should, like that guy was saying, what you're implying he was saying is that go with your class, not your race, not your religion. It's all about economic class, and that's what needs to change, and the way that's going to, help people change their lives for the better.
Do the Democrats focus on identity politics as the Republicans do, because both are actually intending to fleece the working person of their earnings?
Well, no doubt about that. I mean, and they're certainly doing a good job of it right now.
It's pretty depressing, isn't it? It's not a happy thought. Well, enjoy Vermont. Enjoy the beautiful Green Mountain State. We're going to wrap now. Actually, I have to go tutor Arlen, but I always give my guest hosts the last word to show my deep appreciation for them coming on board and giving their time to me. So, Arlen, and to you, do you have anything that we missed? I know we didn't get to all your stories, but I did want to center several of them.
Well, I just hope that we continue to build up on like the protests this weekend, No Kings, and that I hope that a lot of people there will feel good that other people are thinking like them and are very upset with what's going on in our country. And, this is a time they should get together, like you say, in political parties and groups and start to work to make a difference.
Well, we can only hope, we can only keep striving towards that end, no matter how challenging and perhaps even sometimes hopeless or unsuccessful it may often be. Thank you all for being part of Halitics, for watching, for listening. Again, please click like, click subscribe, comment. Any type of interaction with the videos helps us cut through the algorithm. And again, Arlen, thank you. I will be back tomorrow for yet another Halitics.